Shabbat Shalom. How do you know in a work of literature who the hero is? How do you find them? Are their names on the title? Ah, yes. Eden, do you happen to remember? The one who changes the most and thus changes the narrative around her. She's in our Hebrew school, and we were talking about this, but I'm going to warn you that we are going to add a new layer that was not quite Hebrew school yet. So the hero is the person who changes the most. We can see this very clearly. Who is the hero of the story of Purim, coming up in just a few weeks? I heard someone say it. Esther, absolutely, yes. Mordecai was an amazing guy, and he tried, but Mordecai at the beginning of the story is the same Mordecai at the end of the story. Likewise, Ahasuerus, no one would call him exactly an exemplar, and he was the same at the beginning as he was at the end. And obviously, Mr. H was unchanging as well. Esther, on the other hand, went from being the waif that did what everyone told her to being the queen that struck fear into the hearts of a nation in order to save her people. That's a pretty major transformation, and obviously one that's considered very positive, or else we wouldn't be celebrating the holiday. But, and this is the part, Eden, you haven't heard yet, what makes then a hero a tragic hero? Because we have a tragic hero in the story of Esther. It's not Esther, obviously. It's actually Mr. H. Good old Haman. See, in our literature tradition, Esther is the focus and Esther is the hero because she represents that strength of righteousness, that strength of dedication to risk oneself to do good and save others. Those are values that are deeply appreciated throughout Jewish texts and throughout Jewish lives. But not every culture values the same, and certainly in other literature, not every hero is cut from that same cloth. After all, if you look at the heroic deeds of Hercules, was he heroic because he changed a lot, or was he heroic because he beat up a lot of enemies? More the beating up side than the actual changing side. Even someone like Achilles, noble and gleaming in his armor as he was basically a hero because he killed the right people and did it very, very well. I should point out at almost no risk to himself until the end. But the Greeks understood a tragic hero very, very well. They may not have done the regular kind of heroes as well as our literature, but they did the tragic heroes exceptionally well. Because a tragic hero is somebody who has the potential for greatness, the potential for transformation, for change, for doing something that will make their lives and the lives of everyone else around them amazing, and falls short. Can't quite get there because they have a fatal flaw. There is something in their character that keeps them back, that keeps them from having that transformative moment and reaching a higher level than where they started. And we, the reader, or theater goer in much of the Greek tragedies, we can see it coming. We can see it barreling down the tracks like a train about to run that character over. And all we can do is watch helplessly as their world crumbles around them. Well, think about Haman for a moment. I put aside all of the thousands of years of anger and of bad press that he has received in the Jewish world. From his point of view, even within the scroll itself, what was going on? Here he was, rising to be number 2 in the entire Persian Empire, one of the most amazing empires ever to cover the globe. He has risen to this level. Even though he has no connection to the king, he's not family, he's not royalty, he is just a guy who has worked hard, climbed the ladders of the Persian bureaucracy, and now has power. Great. And he strides out among all of those that are now under him. And what's he looking for? A little respect, a little kavod, a little honor. That's all he wants. Just bow as he goes past. That's all he wants. And what happens? One guy won't fall in line. Mordecai, the Jew, is not going to do it. He's not going to bow down. And we can talk later about whether or not he could have bowed down. Jewish law basically says, yes, he could have. But in this story, he doesn't. And what does Haman do? Does he rise above the petty need for the accolades of somebody that is so far beneath him? Does he look past the petty stubbornness of this Jewish nobody? No. He flies into a rage. He flies into such a rage that he can't even see that should he want to solve this problem of this guy, he could do it. With a snap of his fingers, with the power at his disposal, he could have Mordecai disappeared, dragged away from Shushan, never to be heard from again, thrown into some mine, or simply executed and chucked off a cliff. But his anger, that fatal flaw, his pride, won't let him have that simple solution. He has to grind Mordecai into the ground along with all of his people to show that he truly is in charge. So he sets in motion a scheme that will eventually lead to his own downfall. If he had either risen above it or simply dealt with it easily, well, then Mordecai just would have been gone and we wouldn't have had a holiday. But because he is a tragic figure, because Haman could not recognize that there was so much more to his life than bearing a grudge, of being petty, of letting his anger consume him, well, he created the holiday of Purim. And thus he is a tragic kind of hero, because we, the audience, we, the reader, we can see where he is headed, because we know that no one with that kind of temper is going to end up okay at the end of the story. And indeed, as his temper flares even more, what is the next major turning point? He decides that now he has to kill Mordecai immediately, earlier than planned, and in so doing so, by going to the king to get that permission, he then opens himself up to become Mordecai's servant, parading through the street. Again, if he had been patient, he would not have been there at the king's courtyard. He would not have been there to offer the advice of dress him in the royal robes and let him be paraded by one of your high-ranking officials. But that wasn't who Haman was. He had this fatal flaw. And with that, he begins to fall. He begins to lose his friends and support. And by the second of Esther's party, he is completely lost in fear, and then lost of life. I'm not saying we should sympathize with Haman. He's a bad guy. And what he wants to do and plans to do is horrific. We didn't have the word genocide back then, but that was his intention. But we can recognize in him that it was a small flaw in his character that led him to that place. That had he simply been able to take a deep breath, look past holding a petty grudge, seek a simple solution rather than a maniacal devastation upon his enemies in order to secure his ego as well as his power, that Haman could have lived a happy, full, and long life and been able to have done good things for himself and for his family, as well as perhaps the entire country of Persia. But it wasn't to be. That flaw was the opening that eventually would consume him. Now, we're not going to celebrate Haman, but we are going to learn from him. That's what tragic heroes can do just as well as regular heroes can. We can learn from their stumbling just as we can learn from regular heroes rising up. And from Haman, we can also learn. Are we on proper patrol within ourselves, looking for those tragic flaws, maybe not quite as severe as Haman's, but maybe sometimes our anger, sometimes our envy, sometimes our dispassion for things around us that keeps us still when we should move? Are we letting them also hold us back from being the heroes that we could be? Are they still causing us to stumble? Or can we look past them and truly rise? The holiday of Purim is the holiday of masks, of secret identities and revelations. Let this Purim be such an occasion for you Take off whatever mask you are wearing, find that true self that you are, and be the hero, not the tragic one. Shabbat Shalom.